Hi.
Hi. Oh my gosh.
Well, here's the thing. About a year ago, I was walking in a canyon, and I had an experience, and I didn't tell anybody about that experience because honestly, I didn't want people to think I was like a lunatic or something. But then, year later passes roughly, and I see one of your reels. I felt compelled to just reach out and go, "What? Wait a second, what's going on here?" So
So you were in the wilderness. You heard music or singing
it
or
I can't. It's like if you were to combine the two, like
yeah.
song, tones, not extremely clear sort of dialogue or anything, but almost words, but not finished, if that makes sense.
Totally. It
Yeah,
really does.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah. So trees, and now you're experiencing something that I don't hear or experience, but many people I know do.
okay.
And trees will, so I hear words. That's the predominant way that I communicate with trees, but that's kind of rare.
Uh huh.
Most people actually do hear the harmonics of trees. Like trees literally sing and create music.
Okay.
And so it sounds like that's what you were tuning into. And especially in a wilderness type area, it's so much easier because all of the trees are working together. And so it sounds like you're picking up their frequency and actually like tuning into that space. So it's
Right.
totally normal. You're not crazy,
Oh,
and I can verify it for sure. It's just
okay.
not something that I've heard it a couple of times,
Uh huh.
but I wish I could hear it more. But I like even my
Right.
aunt, she hears the music constantly in her forest. And so that, yeah, it makes so much sense to me that you would
Okay.
experience that.
And then my other question is, how do we know they're like coming from a good place or a bad place? Are there bad spirits in trees and good, or is it all good?
That is the question. Yes. So when it comes to trees, every single one of them is a unique individual. And so, on
Right.
a temperament scale, just like people, like some of them are not very nice. They're
Oh,
not evil.
right.
They are not evil, despite what you hear, despite what people say. Trees themselves are not evil. They just sometimes don't like people because people are destroying the earth. That's kind of what it comes down to.
Right.
Now, that being said, there are negative entities in this world, and sometimes they will kind of like become a parasite into a tree, in which case the tree is compromised, but it's not the tree itself. So if you ever have that vibe of just like, no, I'm not comfortable, like that is your
Okay.
intuition telling you not to connect.
Oh, okay. Okay,
It is,
exact. That makes
yeah.
sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
um.
however, I do just want to point out also there's another layer to that.
Great.
So when it comes to the land itself, if the land is compromised with a lot of really yucky energy, the trees will sometimes just kind of absorb, because they're trees, they absorb that energy. And until the land is cleared, the trees will harbor kind of funky energy. So
Ah.
that's usually not tree related. It's usually like underlying trauma or something going on with the space.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is, I also saw a recent reel where you said a group of people were organizing to sort of aggregate, I think you called it wild, I don't know, the wild voices, that they would be a part of decision making. And I was like, does that mean, like, if that was possible, or does that mean that there would be some sort of like, eco or natural, like a democracy from nature? Is that kind of what it implies, or?
So this particular project is basically a round table of people trying to have, like, when decision makers come together,
Mhm.
there's a whole pile of discussion. Well, this group of people is literally trying to bring somebody to that table to share the voices of the trees, of the land, of the animals. And so somebody, it's not me, of course, but somebody like me that can be a neutral party to channel information especially when it comes to conservation, that's something that is being proposed and looked into. And there's a ton of people researching the potential of actually doing that. So it's all preliminary,
Okay.
but yeah, it is something that people are trying to bring forward.
Okay, and if it was the case, that does that mean like a forest could make a decision about like building or not, or like how things are used or how humans consume or not consume? Is that kind of the obviously like where it would go, or
Yeah, that's kind of the idea,
right?
is like how can we all come together to collaborate in unity versus you're in Colorado, right? So
Yeah.
you're familiar with like the way that we plant our forests for
Hmm.
logging and how that is over here
Right.
in the West. So instead of that approach, it's like, well, let's take the ecosystem. What does the ecosystem need? What do we need? And how can we come together
Hmm.
and work as a unit? So that's kind
Right.
of the goal.
Right. And you know how humans, we disagree on everything almost all the time. Would that suggest that nature in its variety of voices disagrees with each other too?
You know, that is something that needs to be explored more. What I have personally found through my individual explorations in the wilderness, through working with the wildlife and things like that, is usually they're all on the same page.
Uh-huh.
The wild, the land, the trees, like they're all on the same page because their ultimate goal is a balanced ecosystem.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, usually everybody is kind of on the same page on that front, which is actually kind of helpful.
And then we don't have all the same goals, and that's the problem, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And everybody, like the human dynamic is the most complicated.
Right. And then as far as, my, when I told you about a year ago, I went hiking and I heard this sort of combination voice music kind of thing in the woods. You're telling me I'm not crazy, right? So like, I don't want to, but are you also saying I might limit who I kind of share this with? Is that a recommendation from you?
I would say you are not crazy. It happens all the time.
Okay.
The reason we think we're crazy is because nobody talks about it.
Okay. That makes sense. That,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, as far as sharing it, that's your choice. I
Okay.
will tell you from personal experience that people will attack you.
Right.
Like I get attacked all the time on social
I
media.
bet. I bet.
But like my family knows, my friends know, like the people that I'm close to, like I have open conversations.
Okay.
And so it's definitely up to you. I will say that I have thousands of people that reach out to me almost every single day,
Uh-huh.
sharing experiences similar to yours. But they're all terrified to talk about it. So you're not alone, you're not crazy, you just tuned into something that you couldn't explain.
Okay. And then what was the other thing? Okay. So what, in your experience, directly with, let's say, a tree or another object in nature, what is what's an example of maybe the clearest communications you had, or is it always fairly feeling based, or is there anything direct that if I started practicing, I can look for?
Yes. You should look into, so I'm a conscious channel. That's what it's called. And so it's called clairaudience, which is clear hearing. And you can practice this. You can look up channeling and kind of stretch that muscle, if you will. But that's how you get words. That's how you get, like, when I channel, I get pages and pages worth of information.
Mm.
And that's how it works for me. Now, not everybody is a channel like that. So what I would do for you is just see if you can figure out what your strongest sense is,
Okay.
and then hone that, and then expand.
Gotcha. And you said pages and pages. If it were the case that you produced a book, I mean, it's weird. It's a weird thing to think of, but would you credit the tree or credit yourself for writing it? It's like a weird conundrum.
Sure. Actually, a lot of people have reached out about books. And for me, it's like I literally am just the space where the trees can share their voice. So for me, that the credit is not mine. I literally am just the body that can put things into a space where other people can receive it. So I don't take credit for anything, honestly.
That could be the first book ever that doesn't have an actual author. Just interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I like that idea.
What else? Yeah, I was going to talk about, because I think you're. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you do interactions with animals too? Because I was like, oh, I should talk to someone about my animal, but I was way more intrigued by the nature in the trees and things like this, and how far expansive that goes. Does it go to like wind? Does it go to, like, does that mean the sun itself, the celestial bodies? Like, if we can communicate with a single object in nature, can we communicate with any object in nature, and down to like a slug? And whether there, in your experience, you found any limitations as far as sentience, the scale of sentience?
I have not so far. I've connected with just about everything I've tried to. And like, you can talk to the rain, the water, the mountains, and anything really. The only one that I say I've struggled with is, I'm working with a woman. She has an ash tree that has borer beetles. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll just talk to the beetles, but the tree took over.
Right.
I actually talked to the beetles, but I have talked to ants and slugs and snails and literally anything you can communicate with. Yes.
Wow. So let's say, I mean, because we live in the wild a little bit. Let's say you come up against like a wild animal that can harm you. Mm-hmm. Now, if you communicate with the animal and it still does its thing and perhaps harms you or attacks you, it's not that they disagreed with you, correct? Because it's like, in some regards, it can't be a negotiation, right? Like a bear or a wild lion, right? Like, so where, how do you reconcile that? I mean, obviously, I'm going to try to do what preserves my life in that instance, but I'm unclear as like, when do you talk? When do you just freeze? When do you run? Given a sort of encounter with a wild animal. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Not in a dangerous scenario, no.
Okay.
But in that regard, just based on what I know from the wild, is there's always so many more lessons that are at play there, and it's all part of like the soul evolution, if you will. But when it comes down to it, you go into primal mode, and that's just part of life. So,
right. So the primal responses take over. There's so much. I know I only have 15, or I have about 4 more minutes. What was the other thing? This is a good one. So I was raised a meat eater. I'm working on it. But given that the work that you do, is it possible to communicate with an animal and get that they're okay with us consuming them after they pass?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's an interesting topic. So I live in an area where there's a lot of hunters.
Okay.
And I always wondered how the animals perceived that. So I've actually been interviewing animals in the afterlife that have been harvested.
Uh-huh.
And usually, if it's a fair take, if you will, if it's ethical, the animals are happy to be of sustenance to somebody. And it's part of connecting with the land in a way that is very traditional.
Yeah.
And that's literally just wild animals. I'm not even going to go with the whole mass market of animal production, but because that's its own thing. But when it comes to wild, usually they understand. But there's lessons to be learned for all beings and all interactions. So
exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I have one more question. I'll let you go. Sure. And thank you so much for doing this at such short notice. You didn't have to do that. My dog. I have a little Yorkie. Her name is Dingle, and she's very sick. and she's, hanging by her last thread here. And
Oh.
is there anything that I should communicate or try to get communicated from her to me before the end?
Hmm. Oh, Dingle. Well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. This space. I just lost one of my babies last night. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. But the biggest thing when it comes to end of life care or anything like that, the biggest thing that they want you to do and to know is that they've always lived a life well lived. And however they go is exactly how they want to go. That being said, what they always recommend or ask for is to just be with them
Okay.
and kind of hold a life review with them. Like, talk to Dingle and just share your favorite memories and moments and laugh and smile. Like, that's what they want.
Yeah.
They want to just be happy because to
Yeah.
them, end of life should be a celebration because they get to go back home. They get
Okay.
to go back into pure love. And
Yes.
so they just want it to be a celebration, even though I know that's extremely hard.
I know.
Um,
Yeah, well, that's good advice. J- I know that people plant other people and animals as trees.
yeah.
And I'm sure you're aware of that. I always wonder with Dingle if I should do that, or I know it sounds weird, but I actually don't find it weird to. I don't find taxidermy that weird. Some people are freaked out, especially like a pet. I would have no problem uh, preserving Dingle in maybe her happiest form. But I'm also torn between planting her as a tree. And I don't know if you can just that last conundrum, if you can tilt me in one direction or the other.
Sure. Really, what it comes down to is what makes your heart happy.
Okay.
From my personal experiences and interviews with animals, they usually do like to return to the earth. And it is part of like the natural process of completing this cycle. So, on a personal level, that's what I do. I
Okay.
always return my animals to the earth and
Okay.
plant some on top of them.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I'll look into that then.
Yeah.
That's it for me. Thank you so much. I hope I was pretty much on time. Didn't take any extra time.
Oh,
And go ahead and send me your info so I can compensate you for this. Thank you so much. Is there anything else? I mean, you didn't ask me any questions. I'm sorry. I just ask all the questions. So
that's okay. I'm here to support people. The only thing that I want to share with you kind of came through. Have you
okay.
ever heard of Sandra Ingerman?
No, I will look her up though.
Yeah, she has a book
Okay.
called Speaking with Nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally just her conversations with different beings, including silt, for
Okay.
example.
Oh, even silt.
So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, and actually, when I first started opening up to all of this, that book kind of gave me confirmation that I wasn't crazy. So I
Okay.
just wanted to share that with you. So,
Okay, thank you. I will write that down. All right. Well, you have a great day and a great rest of your week. And thank you so much. Be well.
yes, thank you for reaching out and have a good weekend.
You too.